If you're not with me, then you're with those I'm fighting against. There's no gray area here. That sentence, like a fated ballot, redefined everything. My marriage fell apart, not because love died, but because we chose two different battle lines in the war of beliefs. In an ever-changing world, where opposing viewpoints grow increasingly sharp, have you ever felt yourself and your loved ones drifting apart due to differences in beliefs? Sometimes, the cracks don't come from betrayal or geographical distance, but from the very ideals, the very values we fiercely pursue. It's like two people once sharing the same boat, only for the currents of the times to push them to opposite sides, making it impossible for them to find a common shore. Have you ever considered that in a marriage, political differences, different worldviews, can become a wall more solid than any other distance or misunderstanding? Even more painful than betrayal itself, I had to watch my love be tested by social upheaval, by endless debates, and ultimately, by a ballot, not cast in an election box, but on a divorce paper. I'm John, and this is the letter I wrote but never dared to send. A letter about my marriage, or rather, about the scratches within it that we never truly healed, because they originated from an invisible front line, the front line of beliefs. I never sent this letter. Rachel, and maybe you'll never read it, but after that fateful morning, when we put pen to paper and signed the divorce papers, in a cold lawyer's office with two single chairs set far apart, devoid of any warmth or closeness, I went home, sat alone in the kitchen corner, looking out the familiar window. The June sunlight was still golden, but my heart was cold, and I began to write. Writing, an old habit I never expected to still be alive, still so strong after all those months we lived in a frightening silence, each like a ghost in our own home. You said I changed. No, I think this country changed, and we were swept along with it like two people standing on opposite sides of a battle line, yet still trying to call each other us, a word that had become empty and meaningless. I still vividly remember the day I met you, Rachel. It was a bright, sunny weekend at a park cleanup event in downtown Chicago. I, a somewhat introverted and cautious software engineer, my mind always swirling with algorithms and lines of code, was fumbling with a pile of trash when you appeared. You were a sociology student, with your brown hair neatly tied back, eyes sparkling with enthusiasm and a radiant smile like the morning sun. You talked about the importance of environmental protection, about civic responsibility, about things you believed could change the world, even the smallest changes. I was immediately captivated by your intelligence, energy, and burning passion. You were completely different from any other girl I'd met. You carried a brilliant light I had never known. We fell in love quickly, like two pieces that seemed mismatched but fit together surprisingly perfectly. I was practical, rational, always seeking stability and peace in life. I believed in gradual progress, in solving problems with logic and data. I enjoyed deep discussions, but not overly heated ones. You, on the other hand, lived by ideals, by deep convictions in social justice, in the voice of the masses, in small revolutions that could achieve greatness. You believed this world needed to change, and you were ready to be a part of that change. We were very different, from how we chose dishes in a restaurant to how we viewed a complex political issue. I remember, the first day I knew you were progressive, with strong social and political views. You joked, your eyes twinkling mischievously. As long as you don't support building border walls or banning immigrants, we can get married. I burst out laughing. At that time, I thought it was just a playful remark, a charming difference that spiced up our love, an interesting touch that made you even more special in my eyes. I was cautious, preferring stability, but never extreme in my thoughts or opinions. I tended to stand in the middle, looking at every issue from multiple sides, and you believed in protests, in the voice of the streets, in the power of change from below. You were the flame, and I was the river. We blended together, creating a perfect picture. When we married, our vows weren't just to love, but also to respect each other's differences, and learn together from diverse perspectives. We believed that love would be the bridge, the invisible thread connecting two souls, despite any opposing views. We had lively, intense debates about politics, society, and what was happening in the world. You would present emotional evidence of injustice, of difficult circumstances. I would present logical analyses, numbers, predictions about consequences, but then it all ended with a hug, a passionate kiss, or a joke. Though different, we still belonged together, like two poles of a magnet. I still remember late nights, lying next to each other, my hand gently stroking your hair, and you would whisper dreams of a better world, of changes you believed would come. I didn't fully agree with all your ideals, but I respected them, I admired them, and I loved you because those very ideals made you who you were, made you a passionate and resilient Rachel. We were a perfect couple in our own way, two opposing pieces creating a complete picture, believing that love would be the anchor keeping us grounded amidst life's currents. Our small house in the Chicago suburbs used to be a home filled with laughter and endless conversations. We decorated every corner together, from bookshelves overflowing with philosophy and history books, yours interspersed with detective novels and finance books mine, to colorful abstract paintings. We cooked cozy meals every evening, shared the day's joys and sorrows, and spent hours listening to each other's dreams and plans. Every decision, big or small, was made together. From choosing the paint color for the kitchen to planning our summer vacation, every joy was doubled when shared, and every difficulty was faced with unity and resilience. We were a perfect team, a machine lubricated by love and trust, or at least, that's what I thought. Our life was like a book being written, with every page filled with sweet moments and promises of a bright future, where there was no room for secrets or division. We thought love was big enough to overcome all differences, and then the world truly changed. Not just small fluctuations, minor arguments, but global seismic shifts, bringing countless debates and deep societal divisions. The COVID-19 pandemic hit, turning everything upside down, from work to daily life. Then came a series of dramatic and controversial presidential elections, unprecedented large-scale social protests for racial justice, the explosion of fake news on social media, and the rise of cancel culture. Everything seemed to become extremely polarized, dividing society into fiercely opposing factions. And you and I, whether we wanted to or not, couldn't stay out of that vortex. We were pulled in, each in a different direction, like two objects pulled by opposing forces. Our arguments began to happen more frequently and more intensely. They no longer ended with kisses or reconciliatory hugs. Now, every conversation about news or politics became a subtle war, an ideological minefield that we both dreaded entering. I, with my cautious and practical nature, always prioritized stability, safety, and logic. I believed in solving problems from the root, through official channels, through dialogue and scientifically based policies. I saw large-scale protests, fierce calls on social media, as excessive, ineffective, even sometimes destructive. I believed in considering all sides, not rushing to judgment or getting swept up by momentary emotions. I often presented arguments about feasibility, long-term consequences, and the need for a controlled path of change. And you remained firm in your progressive ideals, believing that change only comes with a strong voice from the people, with continuous struggle against injustice. You couldn't tolerate delays or justifications for inaction. You believed in collective power, in doing the right thing immediately, without compromise. You often said that silence was complicity, passivity was accepting the status quo. You called me passive, someone who shied away from civic responsibility, even insensitive to the social injustices happening right before our eyes. I called you excessive, someone easily swayed by the crowd, someone too emotional and lacking careful consideration of consequences. Initially, those words were just gentle reproaches in the heat of the moment, statements uttered in frustration, but then, slowly, those words became scratches. They lodged in our minds, in our hearts, and gradually, they turned into deep, irreparable cracks. Every evening, when I turned on the news channel, the atmosphere in the house would become heavy. You would sigh softly, or glance at me meaningfully. A tweet supporting a different viewpoint, a shared article on your Facebook page was enough to keep us from speaking for the entire evening, or even the next day. An article I read about economics, a podcast you listened to about racial justice could also ignite a cold war lasting for days, or a fiery debate ending in angry silence. We started avoiding each other, avoiding talking about sensitive topics, and then gradually, we stopped talking about anything meaningful at all. The invisible wall of differing political opinions grew thicker and taller, to the point where we couldn't see each other through it. I would sit alone in the kitchen, scrolling through news on my phone to avoid facing you, and you would sit in the living room, watching news channels, listening to discussions that I knew you would agree with your Bluetooth headphones tightly on, as if trying to isolate yourself from my world. We became strangers living under the same roof, two islands drifting in the same ocean, with no bridge to connect us. The peak of tension and division came in the summer of 2020 when the entire US was engulfed in a wave of outrage after the death of George Floyd. Black Lives Matter protests erupted everywhere, with unprecedented scale and intensity. You, with your passionate heart, couldn't stand still. You spent night after night following the news, reading articles, and looking for information about the marches. Your eyes blazed with determination, a fire I once loved, but now felt like it was consuming our entire home. One evening, you came to me in the living room, your face more serious than ever. "John," you said, your voice without hesitation, "I'm joining the big protest this weekend downtown. This is something I have to do. I can't stand idly by." I felt a surge of anxiety. I didn't forbid you. I knew who you were, and I respected your choice. I understood why you had to do it. But I worried. I worried for your safety amidst the chaotic crowds. I worried about the potential risks. The news constantly reported clashes, riots, looting. "Rachel," I said, my voice full of worry, "I understand you want to do the right thing. But have you seen what's happening? There are those who exploit the situation to cause trouble, violence. I'm just worried about you. Have you thought this through?" You looked at me, your eyes sparking. You stepped closer, standing opposite me, just an arm's length away. "If you don't stand with me, Daniel," you said, your voice echoing in our small kitchen, each word like a dagger plunging into my heart, "then you're standing with those I'm fighting against. There's no gray area here. You either support justice or you accept injustice." That statement was like a knife. It wasn't just a reproach, but an accusation, a declaration of two clear front lines, with no room for compromise or neutrality. I felt cornered. I couldn't pretend to agree with everything you did. I couldn't ignore the risks of violence I saw on the news. I believed there were many ways to fight for justice, and not all of them required direct confrontation. But I also didn't want to be an adversary to you, my wife, whom I loved. My silence, my hesitation, perhaps became an answer for you, an answer that pushed us apart forever. From then on, everything changed completely. The political disagreements crossed the line of normal arguments and became an insurmountable barrier in our relationship. I remember the feeling when you turned your back after that statement, walked into the bedroom, and slammed the door. That wasn't just the bedroom door, but the door of trust, of understanding between us. Every evening, when I turned on the news channel, the atmosphere in the house would become heavy. You would sigh softly or glance at me meaningfully. A tweet supporting a different viewpoint, an article you shared on Facebook was enough to keep us from speaking for the entire evening or even the next day. An article I read about economics, a podcast you listened to about racial justice could also ignite a cold war lasting for days, or a fiery debate ending in angry silence. We started avoiding each other, avoiding talking about sensitive topics, and then gradually, we stopped talking about anything meaningful at all. The invisible wall of differing political opinions grew thicker and taller, to the point where we couldn't see each other through it. I would sit alone in the kitchen, scrolling through news on my phone to avoid facing you, to avoid facing your judgmental silence. And you would sit in the living room, watching news channels, listening to discussions that I knew you would agree with your Bluetooth headphones tightly on, as if trying to isolate yourself from my world, from what you considered my apathy. We became strangers living under the same roof, two islands drifting in the same ocean, with no bridge to connect us, no current to bring us closer. The loneliness grew inside me. I remembered the nights we used to lie next to each other, talking late into the night, sharing everything. Now, the bed became a separate space for each of us, each in our own corner, without a touch, without a whisper. I felt like I was losing you, not because there was a third party, not because love had faded, but because we had chosen two different paths in society's ideological battle. Our married life became a silent play, a tasteless existence. We still lived under one roof, still shared physical space, still fulfilled the social obligations of a married couple, but our souls had moved to two different worlds. You found resonance with your progressive friends, those who chanted slogans with you on the streets, those who believed in those ideals with you. You spent more time on community activities, social activism group meetings. I knew you were seeking the connection you weren't finding in me. As for me, I found peace in my work, in books, in my own world. I threw myself into complex projects, spending hours researching markets, analyzing data. I sought to fill the void in my heart with work, with emotionless numbers that never judged. I also spent more time on personal hobbies, like running, playing online chess. These were activities I could control, where I didn't have to face polarization, where I didn't have to feel helpless or criticized. We no longer told each other about our day, no longer shared our fears or hopes. Our house, once a home, now resembled a hotel, where two temporary guests occasionally met in the hallway, exchanged a few pleasantries, and then retreated to their separate rooms. Dinner often took place in silence, only the clinking of cutlery and the television playing from the living room where you sat. I tried to talk about my work, about a new client, but you would only nod indifferently, your eyes distant, as if you were somewhere far away. What hurt me most was your distance. I knew you were hurting, feeling lonely, but I didn't know how to pull you closer. Every time I tried to touch you, you would subtly withdraw. Every time I tried to start a conversation about a safe topic, it would lead to an awkward silence or a terse reply. I felt like I was trying to hold on to a handful of sand. The harder I squeezed, the more it slipped through my fingers. I don't blame you. Rachel, you live by ideals, by a fierce belief in a better world, by a desire to see justice. You couldn't sit idly by when you saw injustice. That's your nature. It's what made me love you from the very beginning. I loved a woman full of passion, full of zeal, and I knew you would never compromise on what you believed was wrong. As for me, I live by stability, by balance, by a belief in order and process. I craved a peaceful home, free from heated arguments or worries about external chaos. I wanted to protect my family's tranquility from the rough waves of society. I was tired of the endless battles on social media, and I didn't want to bring those battles into our home. And perhaps that's what made you feel most alone in this marriage. You wanted me to be your companion, your comrade on the ideological front line, fighting alongside you for the values you believed in. As for me, I only wanted to be a peaceful harbor for you to return to after exhausting battles. I couldn't meet your expectation of a comrade husband, someone who would charge into the ideological fray with you. You felt I didn't understand you, didn't stand with you, even betrayed the values you believed in. And I felt pulled into a battle I didn't want to join, forced to pick a side when all I wanted was peace, neutrality. This difference became an unfillable chasm. I remember one time, I accidentally turned on the news channel that was broadcasting a report on a new immigration policy, a policy I knew you would fiercely oppose. You were sitting on the sofa reading, but I felt the tension in your body. Immediately, your shoulders stiffened, and you abruptly turned off the TV without a word. Your eyes briefly showed disappointment and even a hint of disdain. I felt a sharp pang in my heart, a feeling of being judged without a chance to defend myself. I knew what you were thinking. I knew you were disappointed in me, in my inaction, in my failure to express clear opposition. And I was tired of that unspoken judgment, of feeling like I was never righteous enough in your eyes. Before making the official decision, we had many conversations, but each time ended in a stalemate. I remember one evening, we sat opposite each other in the living room. The faint yellow light illuminated your tired face. "I can't pretend anymore, John," you said, your voice trembling. "Every day that passes, I feel like I'm slowly dying in this marriage. I need someone who understands and shares my ideals, not someone who just stands by and worries." I tried to explain, tried to express my fear of chaos, of the consequences of the excessive actions you believed were right, but perhaps our languages were no longer on the same frequency. Every word I spoke, even with good intentions, turned into another reason for you to feel more disappointed. You looked at me as if I were a stranger, someone who had lost the empathy, the understanding you once saw. I felt helpless, like someone trying to hold back a river that had found its own path, unable to turn back. The prolonged cold wars, the looks of disappointment, and the suffocating silence pushed us to the brink. There was no big argument, no shattering of objects, no dramatic event that made us decide to divorce. Everything happened naturally, like a dried-up stream, devoid of life. We simply no longer found a reason to stay together, when even our core values, the very things that defined us, had pushed us irrevocably apart. I remember that fateful morning vividly. It was 8 o'clock. You stood before me in the living room. I was still sitting reading the newspaper with my morning coffee. As usual. Your face was serious, devoid of emotion, but your eyes held a weariness and determination I had never seen. "John," you said, your voice soft, almost a whisper. But each word was clear and heavy. "I think we should stop. I can't go on like this anymore. I can't live feeling like I'm constantly fighting, even in my own home. I can't be myself with you. And I think you feel the same." I wasn't surprised. In fact, I felt a slight relief, though my heart ached as if thousands of glass shards were shattering. I had been waiting for this day for a long time. I had known that the difference between us, what we once thought was endearing, had now become an unfillable chasm, a chasm of values and beliefs. I understand, I said, my throat constricted, each word heavy as lead. I don't want us to live in this constant tension and sadness either. Perhaps this is the best path for both of us, the path for each of us to find our own peace. We went to the lawyer's office together on a gloomy June morning. I still remember the cold atmosphere there, the smell of old paper and stale coffee. White papers lay on the table, awaiting fateful signatures. Two leather chairs faced each other, but the distance between them felt vast, symbolizing the unfillable gap between us, a gap not of space, but of ideology. We didn't talk much, just exchanged a few necessary words with the lawyer, then slowly, deliberately, signed the pre-printed lines. One stroke at a time, as if signing a life sentence for our love. That morning, when you put pen to paper to sign the divorce papers, you didn't cry. Not a single tear rolled down your cheek. Your face was completely still, almost eerily so. But I saw in your eyes not anger or resentment, but disappointment. A deep disappointment in a love that couldn't overcome fundamental differences in belief. Disappointment that we couldn't be us anymore, couldn't be a solid alliance against the world's upheavals, couldn't fight together for what we believed in. It was the disappointment of someone who had fought their hardest, but ultimately realized the fight was meaningless when their companion was no longer by their side. The final vote, it wasn't cast in the national ballot box that we used to debate fiercely, it was on the divorce paper. A vote for separation, for two distinct paths, and we were no longer in the same alliance, no longer on the same side in the battle to protect what we believed in. We had voted for two different roads, and those roads could no longer intersect, could no longer be walked together. I remember you once saying, "Love is the foundation, but trust is the home." And now, our home has collapsed, not because the foundation was weak, but because the pillars of trust were shaken and finally crumbled completely. I don't blame you. I don't blame myself either. We were just small people caught in the vortex of a rapidly changing world, where seemingly immutable values became polarized. And sometimes, what kills a marriage isn't the differences themselves, but when two people can't find peace with those differences, can't allow the other to be themselves with their own beliefs, and keep trying to pull the other to their side until both are exhausted, and love dies along with it. Our marriage didn't end in a scandal, not because of physical infidelity, nor because love ran dry or due to geographical distance. It ended for a much deeper reason: we no longer shared core beliefs. As the world changed, we changed with it, but in two opposing directions. And those differences became an invisible wall separating us forever. Too tall to see over, and too thick to break down. I don't know if you found peace, Rachel. I hope you did, and that you found people who share your ideals, who fight alongside you for a better world in your own way. As for me, I'm learning to live with my own peace, a peace without you, but also without the endless cold wars, without the feeling of being judged for what I believe. I'm still John, the one who loves stability and order, who believes in change from within the system. You're still Rachel, the one who fights for noble ideals, who believes in the power of community voice. We've returned to our true selves, but we no longer belong together. It's a painful truth, but one that must be accepted. My life after the divorce is a vast emptiness, but also an opportunity for me to look at myself, to reflect on what happened, and to seek a new kind of peace. Our house, now just me, suddenly feels strangely large. The kitchen corners where we once cooked together, the sofas where we used to argue late into the night, now carry a quiet sadness, like silent witnesses to a broken love. But at least, it no longer has the tense, heavy atmosphere of unspoken, cold wars, of judgmental glances, of untold stories. I've spent a lot of time thinking, analyzing. True to my nature as a software engineer, I realized that, no matter how much I loved you, I couldn't fulfill your desire for me to stand on the same front line. I couldn't become a fervent activist, someone willing to take to the streets, willing to face conflict as you wished. And you couldn't accept my passivity as a husband, a partner in ideals. Both of us wanted the other to change, or at least to fully accept our views and actions, but we failed, miserably. I still follow the news, still read articles, but now I've learned to keep my thoughts to myself, no longer feeling the need to defend or prove anything to anyone. I've also learned to listen, to accept different viewpoints without needing to argue or change them. It's been a difficult process, as the habit of debating was deeply ingrained in my subconscious, but I realized that inner peace is far more important than winning a meaningless argument. I've rediscovered old hobbies, things I neglected during the stressful years of marriage. I spend more time on work, diving into challenging new projects. I've started hiking on weekends, exploring new trails and national parks, where the vast and peaceful nature helps me feel smaller, but also freer. I meet up with friends we used to be less in touch with, friends with whom I can talk about safer topics, about life, work, without having to touch on sensitive social issues. I've also started taking a world history class, where I can discuss social issues more objectively, not bound by personal emotions or current polarization. History teaches me that everything has its cycle, and some complex problems cannot be solved by picking sides. Occasionally, I still see your posts on social media, those passionate updates about social justice, about new struggles. I still see you participating in online forums, small local rallies. I no longer feel uncomfortable or hurt. Instead, I feel a quiet respect, a touch of pride in your resilience and passion. I understand that's who you are, what you believe in, and I've learned to accept that, even though we're no longer on the same path, even though our paths diverged. Perhaps this separation was the only way for us to retain a last shred of respect for each other. If we had kept trying to stay together, we would have only exhausted each other, drained all remaining affection, and eventually come to hate each other. Sometimes, love isn't enough. If core beliefs are no longer aligned, and that difference becomes too great for two people to peacefully coexist, accepting each other's existence without judgment, I still believe that love is magical, the foundation of every relationship. But I've also learned that love needs a strong foundation of deep respect, understanding, and most importantly, the ability to accept differences without turning them into weapons against each other, without making them reasons to evaluate or judge. Perhaps we were too naive to think that love could erase all boundaries, all deep ideological disagreements. This lesson came to me painfully, but necessarily. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll find another woman who can share my core values, or one whose differences I can accept more peacefully, without internal conflict. But I know that I will never let the final vote of my life again be cast on a divorce paper, simply because of differences in beliefs. I will seek an alliance where we can build together, grow together, and respect each other's individual ideals, without having to choose sides, without having to prove who is right or wrong. I want a relationship where differences are an opportunity to learn, not a reason to divide. My marriage to you, Rachel, was a painful lesson. It taught me that sometimes, what kills a marriage isn't the differences themselves, but when both people can't find peace with those differences, can't allow the other to be themselves with their own beliefs, and keep trying to pull the other to their side until both are exhausted, and love dies along with it. Now, each of us has found peace on our own path, and that, perhaps, is the best ending for this final vote. I stopped writing. My hand was sore, but my mind was still swirling with every memory, every word. This letter, meant to be a farewell, had turned into an unending dialogue with myself. I looked out the window. Outside, life went on, but in this kitchen, time seemed to have stopped. I folded the letter, placing it on the table next to my now cold coffee. Every word, every letter was a fragment of a love, of a dream that had shattered. I realized that all this time, we had been too focused on defending our side and forgotten that we were us. Now, only silence remained. But within that very silence, another question arose in me. Can I find peace in this separation, or is this just the beginning of another solitary journey? Dear friend, do you see your own story reflected in what I've just told? Have you ever found yourself, your loved one, or your partner in a situation of endless arguments due to differing political or social views, or fundamental beliefs? Do you think that, in a relationship, differences in conviction can become a greater barrier than infidelity or geographical distance? Or do you have a way to reconcile those differences without hurting your relationship? Our story is a testament to how major societal issues can seep into every corner of personal life, even destroying a love. Please share your thoughts below. Let's talk about this topic together. Every comment, every share from you is a valuable vote for our community. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on other fascinating and dramatic stories where secrets are revealed and the hidden corners of the soul are exposed. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video. Goodbye.